this is where we are making a big ask, where I'm asking you to help me sum up the rich 1,000 years of histories of Confucianism. But perhaps could you illuminate how does Confucianism today inform Chinese politics?
So, as you say, I mean, Confucianism is a very rich and diverse tradition. And if we want to narrow it down to core kind of claims, I mean, I think one thing that if you're a Confucian, you basically, you have the view that the good life involves nourishing, humane, and harmonious social relations. And it sounds kind of trivial. Who disagrees with that? Well, but you do have other views of the good life, right? It could be a religious life where you're separating yourself from the community or from the family. But for the Confucians, no. I mean, it's really nourishing, humane social relations. But the best possible life is one where you serve the community as a public official, because that's the way that you can do the most good is once you have political power. And again, it sounds, well, who disagrees with that? Well, lots of people disagree with it. I mean, again, some religious ideals saying the best life involves separation from the community, or for example, in Plato's Republic, the best life involves seeking truth, and it's only the second choice that you would go back in the cave and serve the community. The community. So the Confucians say, no, the best life is serving the community, and to do that, ideally you're committed to constant self-improvement, and there's a mechanism that allows for public officials to be selected and promoted according to their superior ability and virtue. So that ideal has huge influence in the Chinese political system throughout history, and most famously, it was institutionalized also by means of the Keju, the imperial examination or civil examination system. But more recently, this ideal has been revived in the period of economic reform in China, where public officials are selected according to their ability. And how do you measure that? Well, through experience and success at lower levels of government, however you measure that, and then through virtue, meaning don't be corrupt, and you show some willingness to serve the community. So this tradition of political meritocracy has been very strongly revived over the past few decades. So people say, oh, in China there's lots of economic reform, but no political reform. Well, no political reform, what does that mean? The political system is completely different from what it was, for example, in the Cultural Revolution. Now there's a very strong institutionalized and complex bureaucratic system which aims to select and promote public officials with superior ability and virtue. Again, highly imperfect and in constant flux, but it's there. And the ideal that motivates it is this very old Confucian ideal of political meritocracy. But again, it's not distinctly Confucian either. I mean, the Mohists arguably had a similar view, even the legalists, but the legalists cared only about ability, not about virtue, right? I mean, the legalists, like, for example, Shangyang, before, who had great influence on the ruler who became the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huangdi, he said, well, how you want to appoint the meritocratically. How do you do that? Well, by the numbers of severed heads of enemy soldiers. It's a very objective way of measuring success. They're skeptical about virtue. I think it's all hypocrisy. Maybe that's where the legalists and Taoists had something in common. But no, the Confucians say, no, we need both ability and virtue. And ability shouldn't just be military success. It should also be serving the community in an effective way, in a way that promotes people's well-being. So that's one way. And also, I mean, very concrete ways in which Confucian values affect the political system. I mean, think of in Qufu, which is the home ground of Confucian culture in Shandong province, public officials are promoted according to how filial they are, which again also has a long tradition in Chinese history. How do you measure that? Well, they would literally interview the parents of the public officials who are being considered for promotion. If the elderly father or mother says, my son's or my daughter's not very filial, it would affect their chances of promotion in a negative way. Now that's, I'm from Canada. I mean, that would be crazy in Canada to think about. But again, in a country where there's this assumption that filial piety is important, and also it's a way of, if people cannot be kind or have a sense of reverence for and care for their own parents, it's very hard to extend that love and care outside the family. So it's also a way of assessing the virtue of public officials, which is directly Confucian. But also, I mean, now to be public official, again, you have to go through all these hoops. And the first hoop is to get into a good university and to perform well academically. How do you do that? Well, you go through the Gaokao, the university examination system. And what is the content of the university examination system? Well, it has some learning of the Confucian classics. Students have to learn from some Confucius or Kongzi, they have to learn some Mencius, Mengzi, and they have to learn some Xunzi. And they have to not just memorize it, but also have a sense of how to interpret those passages. So it's a very concrete ways in which the Confucian tradition has a lasting influence in the political system today. Sometimes it comes from the bottom, not from the government itself. So there's the grave sweeping festival, Qingmingjie, which is a national holiday now. How did that come about? Well, it wasn't the government that decided it would be a national holiday. It was literally tens of millions of people, workers would take the day off to go sweep the graves and pay respect to their ancestors on that particular day. And then finally the government just said, well, it's fine. We're just going to make it into a national holiday. So some of these forces come from the bottom up as well.